any sort of abuse, you really run the risk that people don't believe you. Um, it seems like most abuse, unless it is overt physical abuse, most abuse is just not believed. And then you get into the whole issue of spiritual abuse. And I mean, number one, so many cultures are abusive and people don't know anything else. And then, pastors are taught this is the way you run a congregation. And the obsession with spiritual authority is so dangerous right now. But for me, it was absolutely soul crushing, because when I would speak up, it was either minimized, dismissed. Oh, you're being so negative. You expect too much from these people. Or even you have a wrong view of the Bible. At one point, I shared with somebody, these are the characteristics that I think make a safe shepherd in a church. And I was blasted for those because she told me they weren't biblical. And that was a very hard thing to navigate, because I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how to articulate it and how to put my finger on it. After a while, I started doing a lot of reading. About probably 3 years ago, I read Jeff Van Vonderen's The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my life. This is what I have been experiencing for years. And I had gone from a church that I would say was more covertly abusive. It was just the culture that everybody was saturated in, to one where they got pretty overt in that abuse, to the point where the pastor finally said to me, if you don't trust me, then you aren't trusting God. And at that point, I'm like, I'm out of here, no, and in many ways, I'm so thankful. It's kind of like the victim of domestic violence when they say, I just wish that he would go ahead and hit me, because nobody believes it's abuse until he punches her. And it was like, thank you for saying that, because you just exposed what was happening. And from that point, I read everything I could get my hands on. And the more I read, the more I had the framework and the vocabulary to understand what I had been experiencing. But it was still very lonely, because I had left that congregation right as the pandemic started, and nobody in that congregation wanted to know what my experience was. And so I was just kind of left on my own. And it was my husband had been at that meeting and he saw it. And I'm so thankful he saw it. But that was very hard for me to feel like I was the voice crying out in the wilderness and nobody else heard. I would start sharing on Facebook some of my frustrations and some of my concerns and just some of my heartache, because sometimes you just have to put it out there. And I would get a lot of, oh, you shouldn't be so negative about the church, or I would get the pat on the head, the condescending pat on the head. And I don't know which one was worse, actually. But there were a handful of people who were like, oh no, I've experienced that too. I'm disillusioned with this as well. So I started a Facebook group of a handful of friends, and one of them happened to know who you are, and he added you to that group. And that was the first time I'd ever encountered a nonprofit that focused strictly on healing from spiritual abuse. Loneliness has always been a big issue for mine. And I think for a lot of people who've experienced various types of abuse, because abuse is so isolating, and especially in the church, there is such a stigma against talking about it because you're gossiping, because you're being divisive, you're being disrespectful to those in spiritual authority over you. And that's just such a convenient way to shut people down. And to be able to share with one another these things is just a gift that I am so thankful for every day.